All right, so really quickly, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of our setup here in trying to create some of this background instance tree geometry. So I'm not a huge fan of all the labs tools. I think there's some interesting starting point stuff in there, but a lot of it, like it's a good starting point to build your own tool, but for our purposes, I think it'll be really quick. So, in talking about trying to build a tree, they have a basic tree builder where you give it a line. So in this case, we're gonna look at this. We have our line here, and here it is. So you look, and my line is 2 points. I'm doing a resample, but that's because I was trying some things where I was trying to like break up the shape a little bit and see what that does. It's pretty simple. The resample just is adding more points. The attribute VOP, this looks messy, is going through and adding some disturbance to those points. Now, none of this is necessary really with this tree builder. Like I'll show you, like we could take this. This is what it outputs. So the tool is tab, and then you just type tree, and you'll see this labs quick basic tree. And there's some lab other tools for building trees where you can kind of build them by components and build them off each other and try to do something that's a little more custom. This is just kind of a basic tree. There's some controls in here. Here are the controls that kind of drive this tree. I'll be honest with you, like I don't know what's controlling like the trunk. I'm creating P scale here on this, and it doesn't appear to be doing anything. So there it is. But I can create like a simple tree. This height will change like kind of how old that tree seems, right? So as we get closer, it's a little bush, it's a little baby tree. And then if we go to like 10 meters tall, right, which is a huge tree, 10 meters, that's big, right? It's starting to become a nice big tree. We go to 25 meters. I haven't done this yet, so we'll see if I don't blow up my scene. You'll notice like this trunk isn't going to get any bigger. It's just going to kind of stay the same size. See, so it's like this, it's this little twig, and I'm sure there's some, if I broke it open and went in there, there's some attribute in there that I can play with to, generate something. Maybe my P scale is not hooked up. Let's take a look. And I'm not outputting P scale. So here's my P scale ramp. Let's go ahead and let's put a bind export. I should stop my, let's go here. We're going to put this bind on there, and we're going to call this P scale. It's a float, right? We want that. We're going to come out here, and so this is what it's doing. It's actually going to start small and get bigger, which I guess that doesn't really do exactly what I want. So we're just going to do a invert. And ideally, that will give us a P scale. That is the inverse. We're looking to have a P scale that is going to start large and finish small. All right, we're getting in the weeds here. My apologies. So I'm actually going to let's just do this. Control copy. I'm going to come here. I'm going to put down a new attribute VOP. I'm going to come into this attribute VOP. I'm just going to paste that. That's all I need. Boom. Now I've got a controller. I come up here, it's kind of giving me things. So I'm going to change this to something like so, and we'll make this value 5. And now we're going to come in here and add this to our basic tree. So there we go. Now we got some P scale. It's starting at 0, which it really shouldn't, but you know, whatever. Let's see what this did for our trunk. And nothing. Cool. So that said, you know, the number of growth generations is the recursion that happens. You know, so it's going to go through and create more branches. You know, you see, so you see how that kind of opened up. We don't get the same level of like micro branches. That's going to save you. Like you see the shape, overall shape of the tree stayed the same. But the, you know, the density of this is going to be different. So if we look at the info, we're 3 million polygons. This is a pretty hefty tree. If we come here and we say 4 generations of growth, and then we take a look. Wait for it, wait for it. There we go. And now we're at 8 million, right? And so you see, like, we didn't get much out of that, but we're at 8 million polygons, or before we were at 4. So we're going to keep that at 3 for our growth recursion. I'm going to go ahead and reduce the height of this tree because this will look fine without all that extra level of detail. I don't need something that's you know, this intense. So what I'm going to do is I'm come here to my height. I'm just going to change my height back down to 10 meters. Why? Because it still gives me like an interesting shaped tree for what I'm doing. You know, it's like it's supposed to be kind of this background tree, and that's really plenty there. And if I look at info, I'm down to 170,000 polygons because there's far less leaves, and it's going to be more optimized. And this is fine. Like it's going to give me, for doing some limited background trees, is going to do just fine. So I've gone ahead and I've put a bark shader, which is just a brown color. And then I've got my leaves shader, and that has a color breakup to help me create some variation, and we'll kind of see how that works. So, and then I ended up scaling it down to a quarter res because my terrain isn't proper to scale of what my perception is. And so I just wanted something that felt a little smaller. Now we could go in here and we could add a texture for this. We could come into here, and we could go and find you can find a leaf atlas, right? So, you know, I think I'm on ferns here. I don't want ferns. I want to go into atlas. Let's see here, atlases. And I think tree will give me what I want. See, branch, stem, leaf is what I want, really. And I don't want all this nonsense. I really just want one that has kind of a simple leaf that I can pull off. That's kind of cool, right? So that's like a collection of leaves. So it'll help the scale a little bit. So maybe that'll be a good one. Or that one there also is interesting, the Sopadilla. Something like that I think is going to give me, you know, what I'm looking for. Or, you know, paper mulberry. That's kind of fun. It's got a little red in there. But I'm going to take this. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to go ahead and download 4K. Great for what I'm doing, probably way overkill. So I'm going to go ahead and take the 2K version too. Also still probably way overkill. And that's downloaded. So I'm going to go ahead and export. I think I just exported it, and I'll export again. There we go, exporting Houdini, and boom, there we go. So now I'm going to come out to my material, and I'm hoping this will draw on the viewport. Sometimes I find Houdini's kind of hit or miss as far as that material draw. So here's all my guys here. These are all my shaders. Atlas, it should have given me an actual object. No, that's the fern. Make sure my plugin's been enabled, which it should have been. Awesome. Oh, it's still converting textures. Okay. Well, while that converts, here we go around the mulberry bush. We can go take a look at our leaf that was generated to kind of get an idea of what those UVs look like. So in selecting this, I can just do a quick split. I'll lay this down here. I'm just view from that viewport and click, and now I can we'll pick leaves. And so that gives me just the leaves. I see there's some stems kind of in there too, which is strange. But I can go to scene view. I can go to set view, UV viewport. And now I can see and say, okay, cool. So there's actually 3 different UV sets in there. So based on some of these different geos, it sounds like it's creating 3 different geometries at different UVs. So even in what I picked, I kind of have to go and pick something a little different, or I can do some kind of fancy magic in the texture itself and move that over. So for now, we'll just kind of take what we've got. You know, like this might be something that works. You know, so I'll try that. Let's download. Again, 2K resolution is going to be fine. Download. Export. There we go. This is what I was looking for. So in this, it's going to show me kind of those different splitters, right? So I can take a look at those different ones, and it looks like that's probably going to work out okay. Oh, there's 4. Lovely, lovely. Okay, cool. So on my material, I'm going to go ahead and go to this, and really I'm just going to go ahead and copy, and I'm going to pull this into where my BG leaves are. That's doing some building. All right, so once I'm happy with this, you know, this basic tree, I don't want to have this calculate all the time. You see that's constantly trying to do stuff. So I'm going to do a file cache. I'm going to name this. I'm going to call it basic tree. Again, the name does not matter. I don't want it to use my hip name. I don't like that. I find that oftentimes that'll break scenes, and I don't need a frame number. And I'm just going to save current frame, and I'm going to add to load from disk, save to disk, and there we go. I'm going to go into this area here, and here are my leaves, and I'm just going to paste this down, and we're going to just use this shader as it comes in because it's already kind of all set up. I don't want to have to deal with remaking anything. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say on this second one, which is for my leaves, that was like start with a P. There you go. And now when I view this, there you go. You can actually see there is a leaf on that plant. So if you need it to be something that's feels actually leafy, you know, you can find something, and it's probably not perfect, but it does the job. I still think it'd be interesting to find something that has maybe a smaller leaf pattern to make that work. Okay. So now that that's done, I have my Heightfield scatter, right? So we've come through here, and we've done a bunch of things to kind of paint our maps. This is similar to what we were showing before. Go back into scene view, and I'm going to go to camera number 2, and we're going to take a look. And we're scattering a single tree, and you can see here Houdini, because there's so much geometry that it's pushing through, that it's converting these into bounding boxes. I'm using one tree, right? And I'm just rotating it a whole bunch and putting some little bit of variation, and then letting it fill up. So we have, as far as numbers of trees go, we have 38,000 trees. And now we can change, you know, some of that, the density of that, or we can come in and change some of our masks that we're doing in order to, you know, create larger amounts, right? So we can come in here and increase, you know, how much that tree slides up that slope. All right, so we're going to take a look at that real quick, and this is going to start filling in. There we go. And I'm going to just call this good. Now, I can show you something that I'm doing here where essentially, what I'm doing is I'm trying to create some color variation. So I'm going to take this where I've taken my global, I'm taking the position off of the global and put it into turbulent noise. That turbulent noise is a frequency of 0.1, and this value is going to be dependent on the scale of your scene. And then I have the roughness cranked up. I'm refitting that 0.5 to 0 to 0.5 to 0 to 1. I'm plugging that into the bias of this color mix. And just to be able to visualize it, my color mix is set to red and blue. So I'm going to go to my render view, and you can see I've already done some test renders, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click off my render scene. And while that's generating, I'm going to pause our render. All right, cool. So I actually switched it back to my original leaf shader that wasn't using a texture, because when I had it using the texture, it became really sparse. You could see through the leaves too much, and I liked kind of how full these were. When you really kind of click through this, I did a couple test renders where I let that go fully. Like you can see there, it's not resolving anymore. That's fully resolved out. You can't tell, it's just great shape. Now, the thing that you can see is you can see the color variation that I'm getting in the leaves, because what I'm doing is I'm using, like I said, I'm using that global position of the shading point, putting that into turbulent noise, remapping that, and using that as the bias to drive my color mix. And if you look at my leaf shader, like this is the color, right? There's no textures or anything like that. Like this is just a very simple shader. There's some roughness on there, so it's kind of soft, right? You don't want like overly specky. You'll get like crazy speck hits in there that you have to resolve, and that's no fun. Reflectivity is kind of low. These are probably could even, come down even more, but there you go. You see, you get some little bit of speck, a little bit of breakup, and we have this kind of cool, variation in color, which is great. Now I can come in here and I can start playing with what I want these colors to be. I can come this one and I'm going to select green, but I'm going to push it a little more towards yellow, and I'm going to come kind of dark with it. Something in here. You know what? I actually want this to go more. I'm going to warm or cool this down just a little bit so it's not quite so yellow. I'm going to take some yellow back out. Yes, something like that feels pretty good. Okay, do your thing. Come on, Houdini. And so there, now it's splitting between red and this green color, and I'm going to come to this second one, and I'm going to kind of throw this crazy green at it. That's too much. That's too saturated. So we're going to come here. I'm going to bring the value up a bunch. So we're going to have some like real, like, pretty good variation between those two. Now let's go just a touch more yellow. And we'll let this resolve out. I'm going to kind of click in here, let it kind of speed up a certain area. And again, we don't want this to be like a huge, like really, really apparent change in color. We want it to be subtle. And so you can see in here, there's some of that subtlety. There's some darker green, right? And then there's some of this brighter green. There's that darker green, and then there's some of that brighter green. And so this is going to give us that color variation within our forest. And this is literally using one tree, and it's a fairly heavy tree. We have 58,000 of these trees, and that tree, what was it like? It's 170,000 polys, right? And there you go. So we've got this color breakup, and that's what we're always looking for, is like, how do we add those extra layers of detail, those extra layers of variation? And I would definitely continue to increase like the number of trees in this. I would punch this up quite a bit more. So, another thing, we were struggling with this earlier, and we all saw this, that, it's like, oh, the displacement wasn't working. I have displacement turned off because I have geometry now that's representing that. I don't want any displacement. No way. Not for my background stuff. Too heavy. So this is already, for my machine, it took 56 seconds to render this, but that's a good amount if your machine is lesser. Another piece of this that's very important, don't miss this step, is you have to go on to, whenever you're dealing with instanced geometry, right? Things being copied on these points as packed instances, you have to go into the ROP, and under rendering, render, you're going to change and set this declare materials. The default is save only reference materials and shaders. And the reason we weren't having the control during class that we thought we should was because this was set to save only reference materials and shaders. And what happens is the information that gets written in the IFD can't see where this is coming, the shader assignment's coming from, because it's on the geometry itself and it's not passed in the normal way. And so you end up with Houdini not picking up the shader. And so if you do this, where you say save all materials and shaders, what this does, this declare materials, is it's going to find every shader in your scene and it's going to write it into the IFD. So even if like Houdini gets it wrong and doesn't include something it should, it's going to write everything anyway. And so it won't miss it. And so then your render will pick this up. This is what I was struggling with when I was initially showing this, but here we are. We've got this nice little setup where now we can, kind of push through our layout. I would go through and do one more optimization where I would take all the faces that are pointing away from camera using the direction that we were looking at before, and I would cull those out. I would subtract those from the mask, so that way I could get just the stuff that's kind of on this side. Although you would lose a few things that are up at the crest line. But if you're really wanting to push this, we can come in here and take this, and right now where our coverage is 0.5. And, we could crank that up to something a lot higher where that's going to start filling in these trees. We could take down the outer radius. That's going to make these trees get closer together. They'll kind of interpenetrate a little bit. But if you're doing a jungle, that's going to be actually pretty helpful. So if we took this down, cut it in half, 0.5. Oh, she's thinking. All right, so we've jumped up to 309,000. So we are now at like 6 times the number of trees that we had before, right? But now we're starting to get some kind of, if you're doing a jungle, this is what you want. You're not wanting to see like individual trees. You're wanting to see like carpets of green, right? So we start getting this kind of thing. And the scale on this is off, right? Like all of this, like we saw this when we brought Tommy in, like my mountains, I probably would want to scale up based on the point of where my camera is up a ton to make this scale feel better. So right now, Tommy's a giant. These trees are giant, and Tommy's giant in comparison to the trees. So it's all about finding that variation. But we can see here, we have some color variation in there, right? The darks and the lights, coming through that helps to break that up. But here we could create some nice, really kind of dense foliage in here. We could take the same thing and we could create some simplified geometry. There's some better systems that I could show you guys of how to create simple geo to represent these background trees and push this through. But this is pretty cool as far as having something that has leaves on it and stuff. We could take this and I think shrink it down even more. So let's take this down to like 0.1. Because we're just trying to get to feel right to the mountain. I'm not worried about Tommy. Tommy's wrong. So, well, my scene is wrong, but take that down to 0.1. And instantly we'll see that we're going to have holes and we're going to start picking up the individual trees. And that's not really what I want. I want this to be totally filled in, and 0.1's like, maybe even that's still not enough. So let's just go ahead and take this. I'm going to take this down to 0.05. Let these be like really little trees, so we can create kind of this carpet effect of forest climbing up my mountains. So let's let that go for a second, and you can see memory-wise, it's starting to go up here. So my RAM is 53 gigs of RAM to generate this. So those are all kind of tiny and full. So in order to make that work, I've got to fill that in more. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pause this. I'm going to go to scene view so I can see this. I'm going to turn on my other objects. And so I at least want it to kind of occlude. So I'm not looking through layers of mountains. I'll have at least something to kind of block some of that and say, okay, cool. There we go. All right, so I'm kind of seeing now what's happening with that, and I want to fill that in. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to decrease this outer radius, because what this is telling it how far those trees like stand out. That outer radius is is what tells the system, like basically it's like p-scale saying this is how big I am. So now when I do this, it's going to scatter a ton more points now because I just cut that way down. There you go. I think that just updated, right? It did. So look, we're almost at 1 million trees, right? I looking at it, I can tell I can still go farther. So let's just go ahead and let's just keep going, right? But this is more of what the scale ought to be when looking at this. But again, if you remember the video, it really depends on where you are in the mountains, right? Like if we're up here at the top of the mountains, then no, that's not what it's going to be. But for this scene, the way this feels like it needs to be to me, again, I would use reference imagery to really tell me, like, do I have the right scale? Am I where I need to be? And let's see, what did that give us now? Info-wise, oh, we're still at about the same. So we're not really filling in more. I'm going to make this a lot less, the fall off. I don't think that did it either. You hit kind of a point where it's not really going to change. And then we can change the scatter method. So we can use density using the mask layer or total point using the mask layer. So let's try using density. So this is like this coverage. And so density, you'll see that, we can start coming up here and this just starts packing it in, right? So this is more like a typical scatter of what you would use. You kind of set that density and it's going to try to fill in as much as it can. And again, both the density using mask layer and the coverage both have that same ability to kind of protect as you make edits, where it really locks down, those scatters. Let's try this. Like this can kind of be where we're at. Let's see what that feels like. I'm going to unpause this and now, while that's doing that, the variability, we have uniform distribution, normal distribution, exact scale. And normal distribution will give you a biased version of this. So what this is it's doing a variance on the scale of the tree of half size all the way up to 1.5 times size. And it's an even distribution along that scale. But if you do normal distribution, it'll give you a bias that you can change, where you can say, I want to weight more towards 0.05 or weight more towards 1.5. It gives you a little bit of control. See, I'm still not really happy with that. Like, I really want this to be like way more than that. So let's see here. What do I need to fix here to get that to really make that jump? Well, let's try changing that outer radius, see if I can get that density to come up. And again, this is all about scale. It's about looking at your references and, matching to life. That should be always your guide of, okay, have I hit it? Well, here's how I'll know. I'm going to look at this and check out the scale and see what this gives me. All right, see, we're up to 59 gigs. So if you're struggling with memory, then what I would do is I would render a singular view of this tree, and then I would build a special atlas out of that. And maybe I'll do a quick tutorial on that, not tonight, but yeah, this is still not filling in. You can start allowing, like, so let's do this. I'm going to pause. I'm going to stop this and come out to my scene view. And we'll look at some of the hierarchy systems, you know, and how do we push this. So one of the things is there's this relax points. So I'm going to switch to our foreground because I think we'll be able to see it better. All right, turn that off. Now I can come into foreground plants. And in here, we were doing some mask drawing and stuff to kind of get these. And I was kind of digging into this, and I have this set up slightly wrong. So let's take a look. We have this set up here. And we're going to be able to see if we come up, you know, and take a look at this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to reduce. I want less of these big plants. We're going to say this. And what I want is I want these, but then I want like a surrounding of smaller plants. Okay, so what we'll do is we're going to use our big palm fronds here, and we've got our coverage there. I'm actually going to reduce our coverage to 0.5. It's just so we have less. It's going to reduce the number of plants. Right, and we'll see like, oh, hey, look at that. We have half the plants that we did before. Right? Which it still looks like I can probably get away with less than that. Well, it didn't help while I was tumbling, while I was thinking. There we go. That's what I was looking for. I'm going to hide other options. So there's our scene. So we're starting to kind of get that down where, you know, it's where we want it to be. Now we see we these relaxed points. The relaxed points do is it's going to be like, you know, any other relax where it goes by P scale and it tries to, you know, spread these out. If we turn that off, we get a little bit more of a distribution, you know. Self overlap will keep the points from sticking together. So I kind of get to this point where I'm a little happy. Now what I want to do is I want to scatter these, but I want to scatter them based on where my palm fronds are. I want these to kind of be at the base. So what I'm going to do is instead of using mask cover by mask layer, so I'm going to say per point count using source points. Okay, and now what I need is I need that source tag, which the way that works is you see there's this tag name and it's this Heightfield scatter 1. I'm going to change this to palms. Okay, and it's good to name these based on what those are. And I'm going to come here and I've changed this one. Did I? Oh, I changed the wrong one. Sorry. Palms needs to be coverage. And then this one, Heightfield scatter, is going to be, I'm going to change this to per point. Okay. And then now for my source point tag, it's palms. And what that does, it's going to go and look for that palm plant and it's going to scatter these around that. Okay. So let's see here. So this is an inner radius. This is how much I'm scattering from out of that point. So right, I can start pulling these in. And so now you see they're kind of sticking to where those palms are. It's wanting to kind of grow around those immediately in that vicinity, right? And then what this is controlling is how much those points can intersect into itself, right? It's saying I'm giving it its scale, so that way, so see here's a little bit better where they're not really kind of getting into each other as much. And so, you know, now I have this ability to control. This allows me to control how much my new points are moving and sticking, and then this one here is how far out they go, you know, from that palm. I don't know what this one is here. The range is, let's try reducing that and see what that does. To be totally honest with you, I couldn't tell you what the main difference is, but there, now I've got something where I can kind of set this and have it be, you know, around each palm kind of grows these inferior plants. And that, these could be rocks, right? That we get a pile of rocks. Or you could have rocks, right, as being this, and then you could have grasses that grow up around those rocks. So it's really, really quite ingenious way of doing that. When you're using rocks, you can do something like this, which will allow those points to kind of stick into each other and make like a new kind of looking rock. I wouldn't do that as much with plants. Now, for this final thing, if this is what I'm rendering, one of the things I don't want is I don't want to output the terrain in this, right? I want to just output the plants from here. And so this gives me my plants, and they should have their shaders on it, especially now that we've turned on in the shader under the rendering tab, render tab. What was it? I can't remember the name of the attribute, but it was including all the shaders. Now these shaders should all stick appropriately and come across in the render. So there you go. This should be helpful in helping you scatter some more of these. I'll do another one tomorrow about LODs to talk a little bit about how we can start gauging those in a little bit to to make these, because again, like you can see in this render that I was just doing, where it's really not that complicated and not that much, but just the fact that we're ray tracing that much, it's taking 53 gigs of RAM. So I'll do some stuff on some optimization. We can do some delayed load kind of scenarios that help to reduce some of that memory footprint, but there's going to be a hit. So, all right, I hope this helps, and I'll send another one out soon.